Alright, hey everyone, this is Ash. Welcome back to The King's Speech. So we're going to dive into this week's One Piece reaction and review video in a bit. Before that, I just wanted to let you all know, kind of as a heads up, that after I react to this chapter and kind of give my thoughts on that, I'm going to do a little bit of an explanation to clarify some thoughts I had in last week's reaction review, which I felt like I didn't quite articulate coherently enough. So kind of want to touch on what I feel like are my biggest issues right now with the Wano flashback just as Oda's approaching it. So just a quick heads up that, at the end of this reaction review, I'll kind of dive into that to talk about it a little bit. But yeah, without further ado, let us dive into the current chapter first. So we have chapter 964, Odin's Adventure. And we have volume 14 of Gang Bege's Oh My Family with We're Gonna Shoot You with Kiss Kiss Cooties Too. Honestly, I have no idea what the hell Oda's going for with this cover page. It feels like it's gonna end on a really, really shitty gag, but I guess you gotta fill the space with something. So you see back in Wano, Oden going, I want to go out to sea and have an adventure. And all his retainers are like, of course you can't. And you see him talking to the Whitebeard pirates and going, take me with you. And they're like, what? You just tried to kill our captain, didn't you? And you see that they're all gathered around a giant boiling pot of Oden, enjoying a meal. And Whitebeard goes, you're not the type of person who serves someone else. And Oden's like, ah! It's like, how did you know that? And Whitebeard continues, and I know what happens when you get people like that together in a group. Had plenty of bad experiences with my last crew. You want to sail? Get your own ship. And Oden's like, I tried dozens of times. It didn't work. I've absolutely no skill for sailing. And then you see Kinemon just coming up and fist bumping Whitebeard as he goes, listen, Whitebeard, there's a strict law in the land of Wano against leaving the country. And Whitebeard goes, good to hear. I see eye to eye with the rest of you. I'm not taking Oden anywhere. And Oden's like, hey you all stay out of this. The laws of the nation do not apply to me. I just want adventure. I want to see the world. And you see someone going, 5 islands in the world? Ha ha ha, that's nonsense. It's like, what? And you see Marco talking to Cat Viper and Dogstorm. And he says, you could start counting islands and not finish until you're past 10 or 20 million. And Dogstorm and Cat Viper are just staring at him in shock. He goes, you didn't know that? The world's a huge place. And then they have a giant, what the fuck reaction faces. They go, nobody can count the number of islands out there. And then you see 2 weeks later, where are you going, Lord Oden? And Oden's like, can a man go to the privy by himself? I am the daimyo. And you see Izo just staring at him suspiciously, saying, go ahead, sir. And you see that the Moby Dick has been repaired, and Whitebeard and his crew are setting sail away from Wano. And he goes, I feel bad for Oden, but we're shipping out in the middle of the night. He would have been a good addition just in terms of muscle. And Whitebeard's like, let's say I did like the guy. This would be like kidnapping royalty, only causes trouble down the line. We left a treasure chest as thanks, right? For all the food and lumber they gave us. And you see a swoop, whoop, whoop, whoop as a chain comes and wraps itself around the mast of the Moby Dick with a giant clank. And they're all like, hey, what's that? And then you see Oden's ran up to the shore and he's whipped the chain around the mast. And he goes, I just knew you would try this, Whitebeard. And you see Izo chasing after Oden going, and I knew you would try this, Lord Oden. You're not going anywhere. And Whitebeard and crew are just like, Oden! And he goes, leaving the country is my dream. Let's travel together. Show me the world. And then Izo's just freaking out, going, come back, my lord. You are the shogun in waiting. And you see Marco making his way up to the mast to let the chain loose. And he goes, "This guy's wild. So long, Oden. Go back home." And Whitebeard calls out and says, "Wait, Marco." And he's like, "Huh?" "Pull up the one who grabbed onto him, but only that one." And you see, "Here come the falls." He's like, "Ah! Hold on tight. Worry about yourself." And you see the Moby Dick just sailing off over the edge of the falls. And you see back on Wano, it's like, "Lord Oden is missing? And Whitebeard's ship is gone too." And you have Baby Kiku continues to be the most adorable part of all of Wano so far. And Baby Kiku's just crying. She's going, "And Brother Izo and Doggy and Kitty." And Denjiro's like, "Don't assume the worst yet. Search for them. Search the entire country." And you see, and a glub glub as Oden's just being slammed back and forth underneath the waves, and he's slamming into all the rocks that lined up the side of the falls. And you see Izo tied up on Whitebeard's deck going, "Whitebeard, pull up Lord Oden now. He's going to drown. The future of Wano rests upon his shoulders." And Whitebeard goes, "You saw how many times I refused him, boy, and he still made it out to sea. So we're going to play by my rules. I can't just let a dangerous man like him step on board. It would be exposing my family to risk. If you want to stop him, talk him down. You have 3 days." So you see Whitebeard calling out, "Listen up, Oden. If you can cling to that chain for 3 whole days, I'll let you come up on board the ship." You know, when I'm going, "Glub, glub, glub, glub," it's like, "Blah." It's like, "You said it. I heard you." Whitebeard goes, "That's right. I don't break my word." So then you see a montage of Oden just holding onto the chain even as he's sleeping, one-handed. You see fish biting onto him. You see the waves tossing him this way and that. You see him, just beaten and battered and bruised as he's getting launched into icebergs as they enter a snowy area. And you have them going, "Is he still there?" And they say, "He is. I can barely believe it. Between the collisions in the water, he's completely misshapen." And so Marco's calling out, "Just 1 more hour. You got this, Oden." They're like, "Hey, why are you rooting for him?" And Marco's like, "Because if he passes his test, he's one of us, right?" And they're like, "Oh." And so you see the rest of the Whitebeard pirates starting to cheer. "You can do it, Oden. Come on, Oden. You're almost there. Let's go, Oden. You've got it. Oden." It's like, "Come on, Oden." And Izo goes, "For putting my master through this torment, I will see that you pay, Whitebeard." You have, "Come on, you can do it." And you see on another island, "Why are you running away, woman? Gah, ha, ha. We're going to take you on our ship to Wano like you wanted. Come over here. We don't want to hurt you." And you see this woman going, "No, I suppose you don't. Because that's a slavish ship. Will my price drop if I'm damaged in any way? You're clearly wicked men by the looks of you, who would get You're clearly wicked men by the looks of you. Who would get tricked by the likes of you? I would. Stupid, stupid me." And you see Amatsuki Toki, who looks like a mirror replica of her daughter, wearing this super short kimono covered with all these half-moon crescent symbols. I mean, I suppose I'll give props for now, copying the design of a woman that isn't Robin or Nami for the umpteenth time, but good lord, I would like him for once to actually draw women with dresses that aren't like super mini micro dresses. And you see his band of ruffians going, "The sea's at your back. There's nowhere to run, so give up." And Toki goes, "Not quite. I do have a means of escape." And they're just like, "Huh?" And Toki thinks to herself, "I'm trapped. Time to jump to the future again." And you see a splash and a "huh?" as you see this bloated giant beaten up Oden, just coming out of the water, beaten and bruised and bloody, just holding his 2 swords out. And all the pirates freak out and go, "Yeah, an Umibozo sea monster." And he's like, "I heard a woman's voice." And they're like, "Eek!" And he's like, "Calling for help, Glurp." And Toki's like, "A monster!" And he's like, "You safe?" And then she collapses onto his face. And Toki's like, huh? Did you come to save me? And you see back on Whitebeard's ship, they're going, Odin disappeared. Damn it, only a couple more minutes to go. I guess he couldn't take it anymore. This is your fault for being so cruel, Pops. He had less than an hour left. You could have just given it to him. He was doing really good, man. And you have Lord Odin. And you see the next day that Odin's back to his normal self. And Toki has been administering to his wounds. And she goes, what incredible healing. So you're a human after all. And he goes, too bad I couldn't get onto Whitebeard's ship. I figured I could see all sorts of places if I was there. But all's well that ends well. I'm standing on foreign soil for the first time. At last I have left the land of Wano. My adventure has begun. It would seem that you nursed me to health, woman. Thank you. And Toki's like, no, you were the one who saved me. But did you say you came from Wano? And he goes, that's right. I'm finally out of the country and you're dressed the same old way. I must admit this is a disappointment. And Toki goes, actually, it's been my deepest desire to go to Wano ever since my childhood. Would you please take me there? And Ondo's like, his face as he goes, you do not seem to like that idea. And you see, hey, where'd that monster from yesterday go? That's the woman, Captain Karma. Get her. Like, you found a bodyguard? Then I'll sell off the both of you. And you see Cephaloctopus Pirates, Captain Karma. So you see a guy that looks like Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean with this squid on his head. Oh no, he must be a half fisherman because he's got like 6 different arms that he's wielding swords with. And you have Odin going, 6 arms! Fascinating, I never saw a human being like that in Wano. And Toki's like, we should run, there are too many of them. And you see a gonk as Whitebeard comes up behind him and just bonks him on the head with his Bacento and knocks him out. And Odin's like, it's the Whitebeard pirates. And then the Cephaloctopus guys take off. And Whitebeard goes, get on the ship, Odin. And he's like, what? But I let go of the chain. You gave up your ambitions because of a woman's shriek. I didn't take you for the soft type. We're going on a grand adventure beyond anything you can imagine, little brother. And Odin's just grinning ear to ear. He goes, you're letting me join, White Kichi? And you see the rest of the pirates going, Odin, way to go, welcome aboard. And they're just tossing him up and down. He's going, we're sorry about the horrible craps Pop puts you through. And Whitebeard's all offended. And he's like, hey. And you see Dogstorm and Cat Viper have also managed to sneak up on the ship. And Odin's surprised to see them there. He goes, Dogstorm and Cat Viper, what are you doing here? And they go, we just knew you were going to find a way to get on the ship, so we snuck on board ahead of time. And the other Whitebeard pirates are like, hey, we got stowaways. And Whitebeard cheekily grins at Ezo and goes, weren't you going to make me pay for this? Are you going to toss me into the sea first? Oh no, he's just like, are you going to toss me into the sea first? And he's like, if I feel like a goo-ra-ra-ra-ra. And he sees Toki and goes, and who are you? And Toki goes, my name is Toki. I'm hoping to travel to Wano. And Whitebeard makes the same face. He's like, you do not like that. He's like, I will do anything. Let me stay here. And he's like, as you wish. So I guess Oda's just completely breaking canon. And actually, I suppose he did let women onto a ship. He didn't let them fight. So I guess we'll see if Toki gets a chance to fight or not. And you see enemy attack. He's like, yeah. And you see Odin just slicing the ship in half. They're like, wait, Odin, we haven't plundered anything yet. And you see them landing on the shores of a kingdom. And he goes, what is this place? I've never seen anything like these buildings. And they're like, wow, wait, Odin, we have to scout it out first. And you see Odin just taking off full tilt towards the kingdom. And he goes, it was a world I'd never seen. Cold and heat like I'd never experienced. Plants, animals. So you see a montage of the Whitebeard pirates just going to these different lands, seeing giant plants and animals, and Odin just going and chasing after them full speed. And you see them facing off against a giant. And he goes, it's huge. He's like, people, stay back. He's like, strength, ideas, everything was new and different. Every day my old illusions were shattered. Everything surpassed my imagination. I was so small, I only knew a tiny piece of the world. And you have Toki going, my age, I'm 26 years old, but I was born about 800 years ago. And all of the Whitebeard pirates like, da ha 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 ha. And you see anything could happen. And in another sea, you see Child Shanks and Child Buggy with yet another article about Whitebeard when we're raising all this ruckus over here. It says they've got a new samurai from Wano, and he's a real wild man. And you see the great pirate Gold Roger. He was a samurai from a closed-off nation. I'd like to meet this fellow. This is what, this break next week. Next chapter hits December 15th. I honestly don't know where Oda's going with this. Because Whitebeard is talking about, how much he loves Oden, and all the Whitebeard pirates are all like, rah, rah, Oden, he's such a great guy, he's such an interesting guy. Oh, he's just the greatest, I want to be friends with him. And it seems like Oda seems to be assuming that Oden possesses an innate charisma that I'm not really seeing or feeling from him the way he's been characterized thus far. And it seems like, all the Whitebeard pirates and everyone talking of how much they love Oden and how great he is and how funny he is and all that. Seems to be like Oda trying to make up for that and trying to convince everyone that yes, Oden really is that charismatic. He really is that innately likable. And I don't get where he thinks that's coming from, because none of what we've seen of Oden, none of the machismo, none of the, the feats that he's doing of like, holding onto the chain for 3 days, which is like symbolic of, way back in East Blue, like Zoro doing the same thing, where he refused to eat for 7 days. It's almost become par for the course to be like, yeah, if you want to be, it's Oda's shorthand for being like, yes, this is how this guy is the shit, because he does something so ridiculous and so unbelievable that proves, he's a tough guy. But that's really not enough to form the basis of a personality and, make him innately likable. And a lot of, the supposed childlike wonder of Oden, going to these new lands and seeing all these new things and getting excited about all these different environments and design buildings and seeing all these giants and animals and plants and stuff. A lot of it falls flat for me because, again, of that lack of emotional connection to Oden as a person. And so giving him this generic trait of like, oh, he's just an excitable little kid, and he's found a new playground to play in, really falls flat because it's not really personalized to his kind of backstory and his experience and his characterization. But I think I'll touch on that a little bit more when I talk about when I expound on my thoughts from my last reaction review regarding the chapter. So last week I talked about how some topics regarding my grievances with Wano and the flashback in general. And like I said at the beginning of this video, I feel like I didn't articulate it coherently enough to kind of get across my point of like why I feel like this flashback has been so lacking thus far. And I'm just going to put in the caveat of, yes, we're only, three-four chapters into this flashback thus far. And there's definitely potential for it to pick up either later on in this flashback, and there's definitely potential for Oda to expound on some of the ideas I'm going to touch upon in a potential future flashback further along in Wano. And if that does become the case, of where I feel like, once we get, because I feel like this is a common refrain often here in the fandom, is that you can't really judge an arc so early on because you have to kind of see the whole picture. And it's like the parable about the three blind men who all touch the different parts of an elephant, and each you know comes away with comes away with an impression of that part they touch, but they don't have an idea of what the whole is because they can't see it all. And I feel like that's a lot of the defense that the fandom relies on for One Piece a lot, is the idea that the arcs overall do tend to ripen better once you have the whole picture of where the storylines eventually end. And Wano could be the same case. It could end up being that, we're at the crux of the part where it does get, more compelling. And maybe eventually my opinions on this will completely change. But at the same time, we're 50 plus chapters into this arc. It's already half the length of Dressrosa. And I've never felt such a lack of emotional investment in the storyline or characters of an arc as I have with Wano, which in itself should be pretty damn shocking, like given how far we are into it. But like I said, if things change, if my opinion of this does change at some point in the future, once we get the full story, I'm more than happy to walk back my comments, and talk about how wrong I was. But I'm going to proceed on the assumption that it's not really going to dramatically change that much. So, with that said, so a lot of the discussion I've seen regarding Wano and in general, and something Oda's touched on in this flashback a little bit, is the importance of leadership, and really what lack of good leadership and the impact of the loss of a good leader does to a nation's prosperity and its people and its morale. And I've seen other fans, theorizing about how similar Oden and Luffy are, which, like, each consecutive flashback chapter that we're going through, this one especially makes it obvious how the painstaking lengths Oda is going to emphasize how similar they are in personality. And it's almost becoming like a slap in the face with how much he's trying to really emphasize that connection. But I digress. So I've seen a lot of fans saying, the point of this flashback in Wano and stuff so far is we're supposed to be seeing a what if outcome of what would happen to the Straw Hats if they lost Luffy at Marineford. As people have pointed out, it's not a coincidence that Oden has the 9 scabbards, and thus far we have Luffy and the 9 Straw Hats. So there's obvious parallels there. So, like, it's exploring the idea of, like, what if the Straw Hats had lost Luffy, say at Marineford, and how would they deal with that, and what direction would the course of their life take after losing such an important and powerful presence that really contributed so much to their development and growth as characters thus far. And those are all fair comments, and it definitely does make sense with what we've seen of what Oda's doing so far. But my problem with it is something a little bit more fundamental than that. And so in the series, Oda's touched on the importance of leadership before, and that was one of my absolute favorite moments, and to this day, it still is one of my favorite moments. And that's Zoro's speech on Water 7 to Luffy after Usopp left the crew. And, he gives him the speech and talks to him about, the burden of being a captain is having to make these tough decisions, and having to be a source of strength and inspiration to your crewmates. Because if we can't rely on you to be kind of our pillar, who else can we really look to? Who can we really look to in moments of crisis to kind of show us the way forward? And the thing that really bugs me about the content we got after that, and really that we're getting so far in this arc, is that Oda really hasn't had much to say about leadership beyond what he posited in Water 7. And he hasn't really explored it. And in my opinion, this arc is the perfect representation of that limitation as we're seeing it. And I mentioned in my last video, regarding the chapter regarding the last chapter, my biggest problem with it was Oda was trying to build the emotional crux of it around the scabbards' desire to be vassals worthy of serving the future shogun of Wano. And the line that stuck out to me most from that chapter was Yasui telling them that, they're going to be the guardian deities of Wano, and so they need to train and, be educated and be more refined so as to be vassals worthy of serving under Oden. And, let's assume for the moment that Oda's ploy in creating this super machismo stereotype in Oden succeeded. And he actually does have this innate sense of charisma that supposedly makes everyone love him so much. Is that enough for him to be considered the best choice to be the Shogun of Wano? Because we know from Gyakumaru's flashbacks, the fox, demon, spirit, whatever, that Wano used to be called the Land of Gold, and the people coveted its riches, and this probably is what led to the country being the isolationist kind of place it is now. And we can even extrapolate from the ideas from that the Shogun of Wano, as a result of all these invaders trying to take over Wano in a conquest, needed to be strong and have strong retainers, because they needed to be able to protect their people from everyone those trying to invade Wano and take over, take away all the riches and everything else. And then this kind of leads into the other problem with the flashback in this arc, and we really saw it in full display in this chapter, is that Oden continually reiterates how he does not want to be the Shogun. He makes it very, very clear. He continually is talking about how Wano cramps his style and how he wants to, go and explore the world. And when in this chapter, we see this giant man-child going around, going gaga at all these wondrous sights, just being like, oh my god, it's so much better than I imagined. And the problem with that for me was attributing this specific character trait to Oden hurts this flashback, because A, it's not unique to One Piece itself. Like we've seen multiple other characters, that have had this trait before. And it falls flat with Oden more so than the others, because we really don't know why he wants to go out and explore the world. And I suppose you could justify that by saying, he doesn't need a reason apart from, a sense of adventure, just a desire to explore new places, etc., etc. But that feels like very lazy writing, and it doesn't serve to have the reader build an emotional connection to Oden when his reason for, wanting to do something is just cuz. And, character like Shirahoshi we've seen have this same trait before. It was understandable in her case because we had the whole ties to, her Otohima stories about, the surface world and all the wonders there. And we had the examples of Arlong and Hachi, seeing the amusement parks of the human world, and wanting and their desire to kind of fit in, belong, and be accepted by humans. And even with a character like Carrot, it works because the idea the Carrot was 15 when she finally set out from Zoe. So her being more childlike works better in the sense of her lending credence to the idea that this is a childlike sense of wonder that adventure instills in you. And hearing about these stories, wants you to make you explore, especially as children, with the whole imagination bit. But for Odin, Oda decided that the only important bits of his flashback, not so as far as flashback, of his backstory, were the stereotypical, machismo feats of him visiting a brothel and gambling and fighting. And rather than doing that, he could have done something like shown how from a young age Odin had a hunger and desire to explore the unknown. He had a thirst for knowledge. You could have had him, seeing Sukiyaki, trying to tutor Odin, and you could have seen the tutors coming and complaining that, hey, Odin keeps trying to run off into the forest to go and explore. He keeps coming back and befriending. He keeps running into the forest to befriend animals, and he keeps, trying to find new species of plants and everything that didn't exist on Wano. And I think the best example of an arc that did this well was Vivi's flashback in Alabasta, where you had the overarching theme, of Oda showcasing how closely connected the royalty in Alabasta were to their people. And he explored that in the flashback by, having Vivi go out and hang out with, the commoners, children, and, going and learning from them, interacting with them, building that bond. And we don't really ever see that with Oden. We don't really explore where this thirst for adventure came from, where his hunger for visiting new places comes from. We know, we had the tidbit that he admires pirates because he keeps a logbook like they do. But Oda never goes deeper than that to explore, well, why does he admire pirates so much apart from, the stereotypical line that he keeps feeding us of, oh, well, all boys think pirates are cool. And all of this really ties into my overall criticisms that rather than giving Oden these generic traits and assuming that this equates to have a person having a personality, Oda could have taken them and explored the intricacies of how his unique upbringing, turned these generic traits into something that makes Oden unmistakably unique as a character, rather than just a collection and amalgamation of traits from different characters combined into one, kind of like wearing a human suit. And rather than doing that, he leans in this idea of Oden being a generic bad boy that rejects authority because it cramps his style. And it would be so easy for him to be like, Oden's desire to explore other islands and regions is a result of him wanting to be a better shogun than his predecessors. Could tie it into the idea that he wants to have cultural exchange with other islands because he loves how unique the various regions, the islands of Wano are. And he wants to share that with the world. And he also wants to bring back aspects of other cultures he admires and share them with his people at home. And he could have all of this could have been also tied to the scabbards, which is the other kind of like limp noodle aspect of this flashback. Because again, like we're seeing this idea of Oden takes an outcast and gave them a place to belong. We're supposed to be like, oh, look at him, he's such a great guy. You know, he doesn't discriminate against people that don't fit into society's boxes of, you know, what's considered normal or acceptable. And but he kind of just stops with there being like, yes, they're different, that's all we really need to know about them. But he never dives into, well, why are they considered outcasts? You know, what led them to the places they are now? And, you know, why did they decide to follow Odin after that? But instead we get like 1 or 2 panels of them having come across Odin and then deciding immediately that, yes, we love this man for some reason and we're going to follow him, you know, to the ends of the earth. We're going to do whatever it takes to make him the next shogun. And it feels like at this point they really only exist to hype up and characterize Odin as, you know, being progressive and kind and accepting, without Oda really needing to put in the work to show why or how, you know, Odin embodies all those traits. You know, I've talked about this before on Twitter. I'm not sure if I mentioned it on my videos before, but Wano has a caste system. This would have been a perfect way to differentiate the scabbards by having them belong to the different castes, and you know, and you can show how this affected their upbringing and their education and their refinement, and then you could have this be the way you show how Odin is progressive by having him talk about, you know, how he wants to eliminate the caste system because it's unfair, you know, to assign people to the system at birth and then define their capabilities and possibilities by what caste they were born into, you know, in Wano. And you could even have them, you know, explore the idea of doing something like being like, yes, I want to make Wano a meritocracy. You know, I want this island to be something where people, you know, can be the best versions of themselves and not be limited by the station of their birth. And this ties into, you know, the lines that Yasui gave about the scabbards being Wano's guardian deities. And that fell flat for me because the scabbards are supposed to be our emotional proxy to Wano and his people, and they don't really have a connection to Wano itself. Like they have one to Oden, and by proxy you could kind of say that yes, they have one to Wano, but that falls flat again when Oden himself doesn't seem to have any emotional attachment to his country either. And so, you know, like we keep getting this repeated story about him saying, you know, Wano's too cramped, I want to leave, I want to leave, I want to leave. So when do we get to the point where we find out, you know, why he came back, or when he came back, and why did he decide to become shogun? You know, why did he want to open Wano's borders? You know, what does he love about Wano? And these are all questions that could eventually be answered by the flashback, like I said at the beginning. And maybe, you know, this is all premature discussions. They'll all get refuted, you know, in a couple of chapters. But even then, we haven't seen Oda even laying the groundwork for any of it thus far, which is the reason I kind of feel like, you know, he doesn't really consider it as being something important to explore, to help characterize really what are the main supporting cast of this arc, which is kind of a letdown thus far. Yeah, small digression there. But another idea I was want to talk about, you know, was something I touched on in my previous video, was you could have Oden, you know, the easiest way to solve this problem of how do you show that despite, his desire to go adventuring, whatever, Odin really does love his homeland. Is you could have had his flashbacks, where he's going around collecting all the little scabbards. Is you could have had him going around visiting all the various regions of Wano and, noting the cultural differences in food, clothing, etc. And this would have been another great opportunity for the scabbards to be fleshed out and shine, because they could have acted as Odin's tour guides to, the various regions and towns. They could have showed Odin around and been like, hey, Odin, welcome to my town, blah, blah, blah. We're famous for this. Everyone from Wano comes to us because we're the best at this thing. And then, by having them talk about how much they love and are passionate about whatever their hometown does, you could show Odin falling in love with the place because of the scabbards through that. And this could tie into his desire to become shogun. Because it can be like, it could be tied into his desire. Sorry, I'm kind of losing my train of thought here. Tying the desire to be shogun, because he knows that the best way, to kind of maintain and uplift all of Wano's best attributes and kind of get rid of everything, that makes it less than it is. I'm trying to find the right words for it. But basically what I'm trying to say is, like, give the readers a reason to say that Odin is the best choice for becoming Shogun of Wano, and it's not just because it's by virtue of him having absolutely no competition for the title. Because right now we're hearing the scabbard saying, you have to be the next Shogun of Wano. You are going to be the next Shogun of Wano, etc., etc. But we don't really see, why he's the best choice. And it would have been really great to have him facing off against competition for someone else that wants the role. Someone that would be good for it, not someone like Orochi, who just wants to take advantage of the prestige and the power and the privilege the title gives him. But again, like, this seems like something Oda doesn't want to really explore. And I think the biggest shame of all that is that I've always felt like One Piece has the potential to explore and touch upon such a myriad of, different stories and topics and themes in a way that very few other stories could possibly hope to do. And it always saddens me that Oda sidelines the most compelling aspects of his world and of his story for empty hype. And really, like, Odin's accomplishments as a child are perfectly symbolic of this. Because for Oda, it's cooler to talk about how an 8-year-old was visiting brothels and, and how at 4 years old he was able to throw giant boulders, and how he hung out in gambling halls and was always picking fights, and to talk about, everyone thought he was so cool that, the entire city tilted to one side because they wanted to step after him. And it's a shame he decides that's the route to go down, rather than saying anything meaningful about how our challenges and experiences growing up define the people we eventually become. And that, for me, is the biggest reason the Odin flashback falls short thus far, is because Oda doesn't really seem to want to say anything as so much as he wants us to think Odin is cool. But, I guess that's all I have to say kind of on that. I wish, I've rambled a little bit. And I'll end this by saying, I wish I could say I believe that Wano will have something profound to say about anything that isn't overly saccharine or simplistic. Overly saccharine or simplistic. But it feels like at this point in the story, it's almost par for the course. In that, Oda wants to pretend like he's tackling, serious issues like racism, discrimination, illegal experimentation, genocide, and everything. But the more we dive into this series, the more I'm wondering how much he really has to say and how much of what he has to say is worth listening to. And I wish I didn't have to feel like this. I wish One Piece was as good as I thought it used to be. And I wish it was as good as, a lot of the fans hype it up to be. But I don't know. I'm at this nexus point in my relationship to this series and fandom where I have all these hopes and expectations for, how the series could improve and kind of recapture the magic that it lost. But I'm also kind of shifting gradually over to the idea that, maybe it's too late, that magic is already gone and we're never going to recapture it. And the best I can hope for is that the characters I love and have grown attached to in this series find a happy ending. But I don't know. I don't like feeling conflicted like this. I hate being that guy, that seems like he's just being overly critical of the series, but I really feel like it can do better than it is currently right now. But apart from that, just one little quick update, I suppose, is I think going forward, I'm going to do only monthly reaction reviews for One Piece. So I think I'll let the chapters stack up and then do reaction reviews to 3 or 4 of them at once, because maybe having that continuity of seeing, several story arcs kind of playing out over a couple of chapters will help change my perspective and maybe make me less critical of issues like pacing and stuff with One Piece, which has always kind of suffered for that just because of the kind of storytelling Oda does and just how the series has been kind of structured so far. So I think I'll shift to that just to see if it makes any difference, and then depending on how that goes, I might shift one way or the other. So I might let more chapters build up, and do a reaction every 2 months, or I might just, go back to doing weekly no, I don't think I'll go back to doing weekly reactions. I think I'll probably be permanently stuck at doing monthly reactions. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes going forward. That should be okay in December, because December typically Shonen Jump tends to take a lot of breaks, so that should be a good little experiment to try to get that started. But in closing, I want to say everyone that's stuck through this far, I appreciate you listening to my rantings and ravings of, the flashback and everything so far. If anyone disagrees with anything I've said or laid out, please feel more than free to drop a comment below or hit me up on my Twitter feed if you'd like to have a conversation. If you feel like Oden actually really is a compelling character and you like how Oda's been characterizing him so far, excuse me, and the same for the scabbards, then please do also let me know, because I'd be interested in seeing other people's takes on that and kind of your opinions on, why you feel like he's a compelling character and why you relate to him or any of the other scabbards. like that, please. I would love to have my mind changed about that. But until next time, this is Ash. I'll talk to you all later.